How does social convention affect the way people use social media? I would like to define social and social convention as cultural, and to go beyond that, specifically American, Dutch, and Indian culture. What is social convention? To research my topic about cultures involving social media, I first have to define convention. Convention can be seen as the ordinary way which something is or can be done. It can also be somewhat defined as mandatory. When we bring social into the mix, we observe that social convention then becomes a convention that is observed by a certain group of people. In David Lewis's book titled Convention, he argues that sleeping, eating, and breathing are not necessarily conventions because everyone does it, but something like the fact that all drivers keep to the right side of the road, in the US for instance, is a convention. Even good old Aristotle spoke of conventions. He said that money, and language for instance, were conventions created by people. Based on surveys, profiles, and experience, here's what we can sum up of the three cultures I have chosen. Here's an American family. America has a population of about 301 million. Families are small, and extended family usually lives far. This doesn't always apply to ethnic families, of course. Individualism is valued, and accomplishments are celebrated by all. Here's a Dutch family. The Netherlands has a population of about 17 million. Families are small, and the people are quite humble. Unlike the American culture, accomplishments are considered boasting. Here's an Indian family. India has a population of about 1.1 billion. Families are typically large and very extended. Indian people usually do not like saying no. Negative answers require nonverbal clues. To better understand these cultures, a Dutch sociologist by the name of Geert Hofstede created an interesting method. The cultural dimension method he uses gives scores to certain behaviors of a culture, and he argues that these behaviors stay persistent over time. Now, although many of the categories are interesting when studying a culture, I will only focus on three of these categories. The category of individualistic versus collectivistic is how group-oriented a culture is. In a collectivistic society, members strive to be part of a group and to please the others. In an individualistic society, the people are, well, more independent. There's simply less of a focus on group. Power distance is the distance between more or less powerful members of society and how equality is distributed. A lower number suggests more equality between members of society. Masculine versus feminine. This category can be viewed by a society dealing with a situation in a more assertive, masculine manner or a caring, feminine manner. The number can also suggest the equality between women and men, a high number meaning less equal. It also signifies the way in which decisions are made. Are decisions thought about in detail with all others in mind? Or are decisions perhaps a bit less, thought out? Here's a table for the scores that Hofstede has given these three countries. For individualistic or collective society, America scores the highest individualistic score of all countries in the world, with a whopping 91. The Netherlands is also highly individualistic with a score of 80. India, however, is much more group-oriented with a score of 45. The US appears to be more masculine a country with a 62 score. The Netherlands is one of the most feminine countries with a score of 14. India is a masculine country with a score of 56. The US also gets a score of 40 for power distance. The Netherlands receives a low score of 38, showing more equality amongst peers in a working environment. Power distance earned India a high score of 77, which is not a huge surprise for a country which founded the caste system. The high score indicates that people in a work environment, for instance, will give lots of power to the highest ranking person, maybe the boss, and expect to be treated as such. Now, social media is a huge phenomenon in most of the countries I studied. The general winner in terms of traffic these days seems to be Facebook, though Google-owned Orkut has many members in India and Hives has a strong hold on the Dutch. Twitter is slowly but surely making its way across the globe and popular in all places. I do believe it will catch on a lot in India because out of the small percentage of internet users, many access it through their mobile phones. This means that social media sites with a good phone application are quite popular amongst Indians. So how does the culture of someone affect the way they use social media? I think privacy is an interesting topic. The Dutch respect privacy and don't expect higher society to update them constantly. I was surprised at an article in the NRC the other day about a civilian who caught up with the Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, in the dairy aisle of Albert Heijn. Power distance, anyone? The elite of America are pretty much expected to post every detail online or have a Twitter account, so we'd be more likely to hear about their milk-buying escapades as a tweet rather than in person. The biggest way in which culture affects Indian people, for instance, is influenced by the group-driven stamina they have. I found an interesting quote by a professor in Columbia University by the name of Sri Srinivasan. In an article about Indians' love for Facebook, he is quoted as saying, "They take to it naturally and with great passion. It allows them to do two things they love, tell everyone what they are doing, and stick their noses into other people's business." The author of the article then goes on to say that he is friends with the wife and father of the professor, and that the professor is also friends with his whole family. The article sparked an interesting bit of discussion. One woman in India wrote that her fiancé's grandmother's next-door neighbors friended him on Facebook and has been pestering him about when his wedding plans or future children will be born. I found this professor quite interesting because he just put it all so bluntly. Obviously, I sent him a message on Facebook, but I guess he was too busy for a response. A good friend of mine in the States also had a few things to say about what it's like to be Indian and living in America and how that culture affects her in general.
American culture, they get so much freedom. They have the ability to, go on road trips, go for sleepovers, and I just feel, personally, I feel like the Indian culture is really uptight unless the person is Indian. My mom, as an example, like she doesn't make many friends that are not Indian. And I always tell her, I'm like, Mom, it's good to have friends that, they're different sometimes. And she tries, but not as hard as with her Indian friends.
So I do feel strongly that one's culture influences the way in which people use social media. There are definitely conventions which at some point you've followed explicitly or implicitly and are in a way expecting from others. Thus, it's very important to understand that cultures vary, and just because your friend from India friends your parents on Facebook doesn't mean she's rude. Or just because the Dutch high elite want to keep their lives private doesn't mean they don't appreciate the public who put them there. And just because your American friend is filling up your newsfeed with their accomplishments doesn't mean they're boasting. These are all parts of different cultures that help us understand one another. So before you're angered by the behavior of any of your online foreign friends, remember that people have a background and a history, and what's normal anyway?